Hey guys, tonight we're traveling somewhere very dry, a place where the rain is more of a guest than a resident, and every single droplet that falls from the sky feels like a divine event. You're in the old Medina of Fez, Morocco, and it's raining. Just a little. The scent of wet stone, dust, and citrus peel floats through narrow alleyways. You tuck your head beneath your hood as brown water begins trickling from ancient rooftops into carved stone channels that snake through the labyrinth. It's the 19th century. No running water, no faucets, no handy weather apps predicting your shower time. Just you, the clouds, and a system that's been obsessing over rainwater for centuries. You probably won't survive this without tea, or a clay pot filled 3 weeks ago by someone very clever. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your city and local time in the comments. I always love to see where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking through the alleys of Fez, wrapped in a wool de jalaba, boots squishing softly on slick cobblestones. The rain isn't loud, just a whisper, tapping against tiled roofs. You pause beneath an overhang where terracotta spouts, called cantur, jut from the walls like beaks, drooling water into little drains that guide it away. But where does it go? In this century, that question is more practical than poetic. Water isn't a luxury, it's currency, safety, and sometimes even salvation. And the Medina of Fez, with its tangle of homes and ancient engineering, is a masterclass in catching the sky before it evaporates. You pass by a tall wooden door with metal studs. Behind it lies a courtyard centered around a tiled fountain, not for splashing, but for storing. A hidden system beneath collects the rain from the roof, funneling it through carved channels and gravel filters into a stone-lined cistern. Some are as old as the house itself. You wouldn't guess it from the outside, but these homes are part water fortress, part family shrine. Historians still argue whether the system evolved more out of religious necessity or sheer environmental pressure. Islam emphasizes cleanliness, yes, but try being clean without water in a city that bakes at 100 degrees by noon. Either way, by the 1800s, Fez had already perfected the art of urban rain choreography. And no, people didn't just sit around waiting for clouds. They built entire social systems around the hope of a few inches a year. You spot a group of men adjusting ceramic tiles on a nearby roof, not repairing leaks, but optimizing the angle to catch more drizzle. That's commitment. A quirk you wouldn't expect. Some households use dried goat intestines as makeshift tubing to carry water from one level to another. Yeah, maybe skip that part of the tour if you're squeamish. As you continue through the winding streets, the city's genius reveals itself quietly. There are no grand fountains spraying into the air, no marble aqueducts showing off. Just subtle slope, clever tilting, and an intuitive understanding of topography. Rain that falls on a slanted roof 3 streets over might end up stored beneath your feet. And when it doesn't rain for months, which is often, families ration water from their cisterns with monk-like discipline. You pass a boy lowering a brass jug down a narrow shaft, the pulley creaking softly. It's less about what's in the jar and more about how long it has to last. 1 splash for washing, 2 for drinking, and maybe, if you're lucky, enough left to soak your toes. You duck under a low arch and find yourself in the pottery quarter. Here, the artisans know rain better than anyone. Clay needs moisture to shape, but too much and your bowl collapses into mush. So they've built their workshops around mini harvesting systems, gutters that catch the tiniest mist, leading to jars half buried in cool corners. Mainstream history books rarely mention this kind of ingenuity. Too boring, perhaps, but the quiet genius of 19th century Morocco lies precisely in its everyday dullness. It's not about war, empire, or rebellion. It's about making sure your grandmother's tea kettle doesn't run dry in August. As the rain tapers off, you notice the city seems cleaner, calmer. That's no accident. Fez was built with rainfall in mind. Sloped streets drain naturally, and public wash areas are placed at intersections of runoff lines. You pass one now. A basin carved into stone, with smoothed edges from centuries of fingers dipping in. A donkey clops by, utterly uninterested in your awe. It's carrying clay urns, filled earlier this morning from a neighbor's cistern. Water sharing wasn't just neighborly, it was survival. Records even show formal agreements. I lend you water today, you give me half your harvest next season. Economies built on drizzle. Before the light fades completely, you stop at a madrasa, its wooden lattice windows glowing warmly. Inside, students are washing for prayer with water stored from the last storm. One of them catches your eye and grins. Yep, even he knows you're late to this game. You sit for a moment on a stone step, listening to the last few drops fall from a fig tree overhead. The city breathes with a rhythm older than plumbing, pulsing gently in time with the sky's moods. And you're finally starting to appreciate just how far a few centimeters of rain can go when you have a culture tune to catch it. You're still in Fez, and the rain has faded to a damp hush, like the final note of a lullaby. The air feels heavier now, soaked with petrichor, a word that sounds too poetic for wet dirt, but you let it swirl in your nose anyway. Your boots no longer squish. They grip the cobblestones with a dry whisper as you follow a narrow lane that snakes uphill between mustard-colored walls. It leads you to rooftops, flat, broad, and ancient. Here's where the quiet magic happens. You step onto the terrace of a 19th century home, one of thousands built in a design so consistent it borders on stubborn. Flat roofs edged with short parapets. Not for aesthetics, though they do look charming against the setting sun, but for catching rain. The secret isn't in what they collect, but in how they guide it. These rooftops are sloped, barely, almost imperceptibly. A finger-width gradient across the entire span. But it's enough to send every drop toward a tiny hole, a spout at the corner, carved from stone or fitted with a clay pipe. That spout leads to a gutter. And the gutter leads, well, we'll get to that. You crouch near the spout, where a few stray droplets trickle past. The stone beneath your fingers is warm and gritty, and you can tell it's been smoothed by centuries of use. There's even a little pile of wind, blown olives stuck in the corner. Not every system's perfect. Down in the courtyard, you hear a gurgle, water entering a pipe embedded in the wall. That's the rooftop doing its job. It's one of the city's smallest, most consistent performances. Historians still argue whether this layout came from Andalusian influence or Berber traditions. Honestly, it's likely both, tangled together like so many clay roof tiles. Either way, the system predates colonization, industrialization, and whatever trendy, sustainability, method you've got in your Pinterest board. The roof isn't just practical, it's a place of life. Laundry dries here in spring. Couscous is laid out to steam in woven trays. At night, people sleep up here when the heat inside becomes unbearable. And when the clouds roll in, everyone clears off because the roof becomes a temporary river delta. You notice something odd. Some of the roofs are covered in what looks like dried mud, layered thickly with bits of straw. That's not just some rustic insulation trick. It's peze, a form of packed earth construction that doubles as a sponge. It slows the rain, keeps the roof from cracking, and provides a few critical seconds for the water to find its drain. Below the roofline, the buildings have subtle channels molded into their exteriors. Think of them like architectural veins. Some are carved into the plaster. Others are built out with bricks. And once the rain enters them, it's shepherded with almost religious care towards cisterns below. Or, in shared houses, into a communal basin. You peek down into one such channel. A feather floats there, stuck in a bend. You nudge it loose with a twig, and the water continues its lazy descent. The funny thing is, this whole system was made with zero modern tech. No PVC, no pumps, no digital monitoring apps. Just gravity, instinct, and trial, and error spread over generations. One homeowner learns the hard way that his drain clogs with leaves. His grandson builds a leaf trap. Another finds her wall seeping in summer. She adds an extra lip of stone around the gutter. Problem solving, but slow, deliberate, not rushed like a TikTok hack. A quirky bit. Some families painted lucky symbols around their rooftop drains. Tiny blue hands. Spirals. Even a few suspiciously goat-shaped icons, warding off whatever spirit might steal their water in the night. We're not saying it worked, but hey, no lawsuits were filed. You tiptoe along the edge of one roof, careful not to disrupt a cluster of sun-dried figs. The view is pure ocre, flat rooftops stretching endlessly, dotted with clay pots and the occasional sleepy cat. All of them tuned to one mission: catch the rain, channel it downward, store it for a season that might forget you. At one house, you spot a broken spout replaced with a cut soda bottle. That wasn't there in 1850, of course, but it proves something timeless. People adapt. Whether it's a bit of 19th century terracotta or a 21st century bit of plastic wedged into a wall with hope and spit, the principle's the same. You hear voices nearby, two women chatting as they check the drains. You can't see them, but their ladder bounces between the rooftops. Rain, gossip, maintenance, a rhythm older than clocks. Back down on the street, you find a workshop where they carve roof channels from limestone. The artisan is whistling, chisel tapping gently against the block. He stops to show you a finished piece, curved just so, with a little notch designed to reduce splashing. It's both engineering and art. That's another thing, these systems aren't ugly. The gutters are sometimes painted, tiled, or etched with motifs. One even has a date palm leaf design running along its side. It's not just about function, it's about dignity. Your roof can be useful and beautiful, thank you very much. Mainstream history loves its empires and wars, but it skips over the poetry of things like this. A drain carved in 1812 that still works today because some mason cared enough to get the angle exactly right. You find yourself smiling. There's something calming about it all. The patient, almost invisible attention to detail. The shared belief that every drop matters. And the quiet confidence that even in a dry place, humans will find a way to make the sky work for them. As you step back into the house, ducking under a linen sheet flapping in the breeze, you realize this system hasn't ended. It just leads deeper, into walls, into tunnels, into cisterns. You've seen the starting line. Now, it's time to follow the water underground. You descend a staircase, cool, curved, and just a little uneven from centuries of footfalls. The tiles are smooth under your touch, and the scent changes with every step. Up above, the air held rain and dust. Down here, it's thick with earth, a hint of lime, and something else you can't quite place. Maybe olive soap. Or possibly just a long, forgotten puddle. Either way, it's oddly soothing. At the bottom, you push open a wooden hatch. It creaks like a theater curtain, and beyond it lies the heart of the home, the cistern. It's dark, quiet, and perfectly still. A Sariji. Not a place for swimming, though the temptation to cannonball is real. This is a place of reverence. Stored rainwater, gathered from those sloped roofs you just explored, rests here in soft, echoing silence. You take a seat on a low stone bench beside the cistern and peer in. The surface of the water glimmers faintly, reflecting what little light spills in from a small ventilation shaft. It's deeper than you expected. 10 feet? 12? Historians still argue whether deeper cisterns were a practical choice or a matter of family status. Deeper means more storage, but also more money to dig and maintain. What you're looking at is the result of a delicate process. Rain falls on the roof, runs through gutters, passes through a filtration pit, often made of layered gravel, charcoal, and sand, and finally trickles into this cool basin. Some households had secondary filters, just in case a lizard took a detour mid-gutter. Nothing says, surprise, like a floating gecko during breakfast tea. The inside walls of the cistern are smooth, lined with a special lime plaster, often mixed with marble dust and olive soap. This is tadelact, Morocco's famous waterproof coating. It's burnished with smooth stones to make it gleam like satin and repel water like a waxed sports car. Stylish and functional. You run your fingers over the tadelact and feel the tiniest ridge, evidence of centuries of touch-ups. These cisterns were cared for like family members. Emptied, cleaned, inspected. A cracked wall could mean illness, or worse, a dry summer. So families watched for signs, tiny leaks, unusual smells, sudden color changes. It was part science, part superstition. In some homes, you'd find a floating wooden dipstick. Not a metaphor, an actual stick, marked with notches. It told you how much water was left without risking contamination by dipping your hand. And yes, some kids absolutely used it for sword fights, which is why their mothers absolutely invented the no cistern games rule. You hear a soft splash, maybe a drip from the roof far above. The water is replenished slowly, even in the wet months. No pumps here, just gravity and patience. In a really rainy year, a cistern might overflow, and the excess would be redirected into an outdoor fountain. That wasn't just a flex. It was practical. Flowing water stayed cleaner than stagnant reserves, and in a drought year, you ration like a monk. Some families would add crushed mint to stored water to improve the taste. Others believed dropping in a silver coin kept it fresh. Not because of any known antibacterial properties, but because Aunt Fatima said it worked, and you weren't about to argue with her. In city mansions, the cisterns could be palatial. Arched ceilings, tile mosaics, even little niches for candles. But in rural homes, they were often simple clay, lined pits, with lids covered in dried reeds or goat hide. The principle stayed the same. Catch, store, survive. Quirky detail. In some households, newly married couples were brought down to the cistern as part of a blessing ritual. May your well never run dry, they'd say. Not quite romantic, but deeply practical. Like giving someone a fire extinguisher as a wedding gift. You hope you never need it, but boy, are you glad it's there. You reach for a brass ladle hanging on a hook. It's been dipped 1,000 times into this water, each scoop carrying memories of meals cooked, feet washed, plants nourished, lips quenched. You lift it gently and take a sip. It's cool, just above freezing, with a slight mineral edge. Not delicious, but real, like drinking the memory of rain. Above you, footsteps echo. The family has returned from errands. You can hear laughter, the creak of baskets, maybe the clink of a teacup. Someone's probably carrying a pail to top off the kitchen pot. That water's journey, from sky to stone to cup, took hours, days even. And yet no one rushes it. There's no app to speed up rain. Historians debate how widespread this system was outside urban centers. Did every household have one? Or only those with the means to build below ground? Some argue shared community cisterns served poorer neighborhoods. Others suggest even humble homes had some version. Proof of a culture that prioritized water, not just as a necessity, but as a foundation of dignity. You climb back up, leaving the cool dark for the golden late afternoon. As you step into the courtyard, the contrast hits you. Heat, light, sound. The city pulses again. But you carry a bit of that hush with you. That moment beside the cistern, when the only sound was a drip of rainwater from last week's storm. You look up at the sky, now a blank canvas of blue. Empty. Dry. But that's okay. The last rain still lives here. The sun's hanging low now, drizzling amber across the tops of ochre walls. And the courtyard tiles are finally dry under your feet. You stretch out on a bench, toes still tingling from that cool cistern visit, and gaze up at a roof that practically glows. Not from gold. No. That shine comes from tadelact. Tadelact isn't just some fancy lime plaster. It's Morocco's magical, slightly smug answer to waterproofing, and it has a flair for drama. Smooth as polished marble, but entirely handmade, this ancient technique has been sealing walls, cisterns, fountains, and bathhouses for centuries. And in the 19th century, Especially in places like Fez and Marrakesh, Tadelact was the go-to for rain harvesting structures. You rise and run your fingers across a nearby wall. It's like touching soapstone kissed by the desert sun. That buttery surface isn't luck, it's labor. The process starts with lime plaster made from kilned limestone mixed with sand, sometimes marble powder, and always a whisper of local secrets. The key? Olive soap. Not for its scent, though it helps. The fatty acids in traditional black olive soap help close the plaster's pores, making it water repellent without suffocating the wall. The wall you're admiring has seen 2 centuries of rain and still looks like it could model for a skincare ad. Historians still argue whether Tadelact originated in Marrakesh's hammams or in the water cisterns of Fez. Either way, it's as Moroccan as mint tea and slightly more functional. To finish the Tadelact process, artisans buff the plaster with smooth river stones. Yes, actual stones, rubbing for hours until it shimmers. It's slow, painfully slow. 1 square meter might take an entire day, but once done, it lasts. There are 19th century rides still sealed with their original Tadelact. Try saying that about your kitchen grout. Now, here's the quirky part. Some families believed adding a few drops of rose water during polishing brought good luck and sweeter rain. The logic? Who knows? But it gave the room a dreamy scent, so who's complaining? You wander into a domed room, once a hammam, now abandoned. The walls curve inward like a giant clay teacup, and everywhere your flashlight lands, you see Tadelact. Pale pink, dove gray, desert ochre. The colors come not from dyes, but from local minerals mixed into the lime. The domed ceiling, also waterproofed. Because if you're going to bathe in rainwater, you'd better not let it drip through the ceiling onto your cousin's dinner. As you step into the next chamber, your foot echoes. The floor here was also Tadelacted, which, aside from being an oddly satisfying verb, means it resisted mold like a champ. And unlike modern sealants, this finish didn't flake or peel. If it cracked, you just patched it with more plaster and soap. Like Sardo starter for your walls. One mason from the 1800s, it said, refused to work on Fridays unless the walls felt right. Superstition? Maybe. Or maybe the man just knew that some lime batches need to rest. Either way, his handiwork still shimmers in the city's oldest bathhouses. You follow a corridor that leads to a private rides fountain. Small, star, shape, and serene. Its bowl is lined with Tadelact the color of egg yolk. Rainwater from the roof above trickled here, before being scooped for ablutions. It's not just plumbing, it's poetry. The finish doesn't just protect, it seduces. You can imagine a 19th century scholar pausing here, running his hand across the plaster, and mumbling, This is hydration with flair. Of course, no system is flawless. Tadelact, for all its elegance, is a diva. It hates harsh chemicals, dislikes sudden impacts, and absolutely loathes being scrubbed with anything coarser than a whisper. So 19th century households had to treat it gently. That meant careful washing with olive soap and patience. So much patience. Basically, you had to love your walls. Today, tourists gawk at restored ryads and marvel at the luxury spa feel, completely unaware that what they're admiring was born out of necessity. When water is scarce and storage must last months, your surfaces can't be porous. They must hold fast, stay cool, and look decent while doing it. Tadelact did all 3. There's a metaphor somewhere here, you think. Something about resilience disguised as beauty. But you're too relaxed to chase it. You settle beside the fountain, listening to a faint drip from a spout overhead. Probably just leftover condensation, but it feels intentional, like the building's still performing its old duties. Nearby, a cat stretches along a sunny patch of floor. It's claimed the warmest spot of Tadelact, obviously. You envy it. Not just the nap potential, but the cat's ignorance. It has no idea how rare this water, safe plaster is, how few people still know how to make it right. That knowledge, like the rain it once captured, is trickling away. But for now, it's all still here. The walls that breathe, the floors that gleam, the surfaces that hold memory like skin holds scent. You lean back, eyes heavy, and imagine a time when every household cared deeply, almost reverently, about the craftsmanship behind storing a single storm. Because in Morocco's 19th century, a dry season wasn't a crisis. It was expected. So they planned, they polished, they waterproofed with art. And when the skies opened, even just for an hour, they were ready. The sound of water draws you through a tiled archway, soft and insistent. A rhythmic trickle, like someone humming while sweeping the floor. You step into a mosque courtyard, and instantly the temperature drops. Not by much, but enough to make your skin sigh with relief. The fountain in the center is no grand marble showpiece. It's shallow, octagonal, and lined with green and white zellage. At first glance, it's just for decoration, but you know better now. This, like so much else in 19th century Moroccan cities, is about harvesting water as elegantly as possible. Mosques weren't just spiritual centers, they were hydrological hubs. That central fountain, it often served as a secondary cistern, quietly collecting overflow from rooftops and courtyards during the rains. And the water wasn't just for display or even just for ablution. It helped the mosque function as a place of ritual cleanliness and community resilience. You crouch near the fountain's edge. The water is clean, remarkably so, and cold enough to make your fingers tingle. A nearby drain catches your eye, subtly set into the tile. Rainwater enters the courtyard through gutters along the tiled roof, runs down small marble chutes, carved with subtle angles, and slips into that drain. It's like watching a polite race between raindrops. From here, the water often makes its way to underground tanks, sometimes even shared with adjacent buildings. That's right, 19th century mosques often had communal arrangements with nearby homes or madrasas, religious schools. Historians still debate how formal these systems were. Were they managed by the Waqf, the religious endowment, or did neighbors simply strike handshake deals over tea? Either way, it worked. And speaking of the Waqf, many rainwater systems were funded by these endowments. You might find a carved inscription over a cistern door, gifted for the benefit of the thirsty by Hajj Ali, son of Hamid. A permanent good deed, catching rain for generations. Like a heavenly savings account, but wetter. You shift to a shady corner, where the cool stone seats are worn smooth. During prayer times, people would gather here, washing in silence from shared fountains. But when rain was scarce, access could be limited. Only essential uses, ablutions, drinking, ritual cleansing, washing your donkey, that had to wait. And yes, there were rules. Strict ones. You weren't allowed to muddy the washing area, and children caught playing splash games were sometimes assigned extra chores, like cleaning the tile drains with a toothbrush-sized twig. Harsh. Maybe. Effective. Oh, definitely. Quirky fact. Some larger mosques had built, in rainfall, listening posts, tiny rooms with acoustic domes that amplified the sound of distant thunder or the first raindrops hitting the roof. The imam could hear the rain coming before the people outside even saw the clouds. Part weather station, part holy echo chamber. You stroll past the prayer hall entrance and find yourself in a long corridor where spouts jut from the wall, rows of them. These are sables, public fountains. Many were built into mosques and religious complexes, not just for worshippers, but for passers-by. You could fill a jug here, cool your feet, even wash your vegetables if you asked nicely. The water, again, came from rain, stored and filtered in chambers hidden behind thick walls. One of the spouts still drips, ever so slowly. Each droplet lands in a small basin, a sound like an elderly typewriter. The system isn't in use anymore, but it hasn't forgotten its job. Of course, not all mosques could afford elaborate storage systems. In poorer neighborhoods, water would be shared between several structures, and elaborate ropes and buckets became a sort of sacred choreography. Children learned early how to balance full jugs on their heads, and no one dared spill a drop within mosque walls. It wasn't just water. It was sanctity in liquid form. Some mosques even had emergency access tunnels, allowing rainwater to be directed toward a nearby bathhouse or bakery in times of scarcity. Historians disagree on how often these were used. Some claim they were practical marvels. Others argue they were symbolic gestures that rarely saw actual use. Still, just knowing the option existed made communities feel a bit more secure. You find yourself at a small garden patch beside the mosque wall. The plants, mint, basil, maybe some wild rocket, are growing near a stone-lined trench. That's runoff water from the last rain, redirected so nothing is wasted. Even the overflow from the ablution fountain feeds life here. Nothing escapes the plan. And that's the quiet genius of it all. Religious practice, urban planning, and survival engineering blend seamlessly. You perform ablutions, and the runoff waters a tree. You pray, and the roof above you channels rain into a cistern for someone to drink days later. It's not just a building. It's a breathing system. You pause beneath an awning where someone once carved a phrase into the wood, Baraka Filma, blessing in the water. Simple, earnest, and true. As the evening call to prayer rings out, echoing softly across the Medina, you sit back and let it wash over you. The city listens. The cisterns rest full. And somewhere beneath your feet, the last rainfall still hums through stone channels, whispering its ancient journey. The sun is long gone now, replaced by a violet dusk that slips down the alley walls like ink. The air cools, and the rooftops you visited earlier have gone quiet. But someone is still awake, someone with a ladder slung over one shoulder and a lantern swinging gently from the other. You follow him at a distance, careful not to startle him. He walks with the purpose of a man who knows every roof tile in this part of the Medina. And in a way, he does. Meet the rainmen. Those unofficial but essential figures in 19th century Moroccan cities whose job was to make sure water got where it was supposed to go. He stops beneath a small dome, leans the ladder against the side, and climbs. Quietly, like he's sneaking up on the sky. Up on the roof, he checks the spouts, gently lifts a tile, removes a bit of debris, a clump of leaves, the remains of a pigeon nest, and tucks it all into a sack slung over his back. It's not glamorous work, but it's sacred. If one drain clogs during the next storm, the courtyard below could flood. Or worse, the cistern could be contaminated. In the 1800s, families hired men like this to walk the roofs during the rainy season. Not every night, just the important ones. Those tense weeks in December or March when the sky promised more than it usually delivered. These roof walkers weren't just cleaners. They were part janitor, part weatherman, part plumber, and part lucky charm. Historians still argue whether these men were formally trained or just inherited the role from older relatives. Some accounts mention certificates, handwritten and sealed, while others suggest it was more of a "my uncle knows a guy" kind of gig. Either way, they were trusted, deeply. And they weren't alone in the water economy. There were water clerks, usually attached to mosques or bathhouses, who kept records of water levels in cisterns. Yes, records. Handwritten ledgers noting rainfall, usage, repairs, and, occasionally, petty complaints. One entry from 1883 reads, "Adel's mule drank twice." This is noted. Bureaucracy, even in drizzle. Back on the ground, you trail behind the roof walker as he disappears into a side alley. This quarter is known for its dye workers, and rain here carries more than water. It carries risk. A blocked drain could send colored runoff into someone's clean basin, turning precious water indigo or rust red. So roof walkers here are even more cautious. You duck into a side courtyard where another man, a water measurer, is at work. He carries a brass rod marked like a ruler. With it, he lowers into the cistern and then reads the wet line like a fortune teller. 73 centimeters. Enough for 4 households, if they're careful. His assistant jots the number on a slate. No ink wasted. They'll transfer it later to the ledger. Right after tea, and perhaps a bit of loud neighborly gossip. A quirky custom. In some quarters, These men were paid partly in fruit, usually figs or preserved lemons. Why? Because water was tied to the health of gardens, and if your cistern was full, you probably had a good crop. Plus, it's hard to argue over measurements while chewing on something tart. You hear laughter from a nearby window. A group of women chatting over a courtyard basin. One of them points to the sky, clouds gathering, and they begin to pull linens inside. Meanwhile, the roof walker moves on, lantern bobbing, leaving no trace but the faint scent of olive soap. You wonder how many of these figures worked behind the scenes without recognition. They weren't imams or merchants or scholars. They didn't write books or fund fountains. But they kept the system running. If the gutters failed, if the cistern cracked, if the measurements were off, it was their names whispered in frustration. Or, if things went smoothly, not mentioned at all. Still, there were rituals. At the end of the rainy season, some neighborhoods hosted small meals for their water stewards. Nothing fancy. A couscous, some tea, a few murmured blessings. May your ladder never slip. May your drains never clog. You slip into a public bathhouse, steam curling from a doorway like a ghost stretching. Inside, the water clerks are inspecting a small dome in the ceiling. Rain used to enter through it, back when the bathhouse was also a water collector. Now it's mostly decorative, but they keep it clean, just in case. Historians debate whether these public systems were more efficient than private cisterns. Some argue the shared spaces ensured better maintenance. Others say people took more care when the water was their own. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. A city built on both independence and interdependence. You leave the bathhouse just as the first fat drops of new rain begin to fall. The roof walker is still visible up ahead, already leaning into another inspection. His lantern light blinks like a slow heartbeat. And down the street, a clerk begins jotting something new in chalk, the date. The rainfall, the sound the drain made when it swallowed the first drops. Nothing goes unnoticed. Nothing is wasted. Even the sky is measured here. The rain fell last night, a steady drum roll on tile and stone, and now the Medina wakes to a hush. Not silence, exactly. More like a respectful quiet, as though everyone's giving the rain its moment to settle into memory. You step outside and the world feels rinsed. Brighter. Smooth at the edges. The streets are damp but not muddy. That's intentional. Every slope, every groove in the cobblestones guides water just so, toward underground channels or garden plots, away from doorways and food stalls. You look down and spot tiny channels veering into side alleys, like the city's veins still pulsing with last night's storm. And that's where the obsession begins. You thought people collected rainwater here? No, friend. They counted it. In 19th century Morocco, especially in cities like Fez and Marrakesh, water wasn't just a resource. It was a math problem, a budget, a moral lesson. Every drop had to be accounted for. You couldn't just hoard it. That would have been scandalous, and probably grounds for a neighborhood tribunal, featuring a lot of passive-aggressive mint tea. You pass a riad whose cistern is open for inspection. A small brass measuring stick leans against the well, its etched lines worn smooth by use. This isn't a museum piece. It's a tool of survival. The mikyas, that's what they called the water gauge, was often handled by a single, trusted family member, usually older. Always meticulous, they'd lower it gently into the cistern, wait for the faintest splash, then pull it up and read the line. Every week, same time. Recorded on a chalkboard in the kitchen, or in a small leather ledger hidden behind spices. If it was a dry month, the ledger might also include entries like no baths until Friday, or share washing water with cousin Ahmed. Because rationing wasn't just about math, it was about relationships. You had to coordinate who got what, when, and for how long. Historians still argue whether these practices were community-driven or imposed by religious guidelines. In truth, it was probably both. Islam places a high value on cleanliness and moderation, and when water is sacred and scarce, that becomes cultural DNA. But even beyond religion, practicality ruled. You can't cook couscous with hope. Now, here's a fun little quirk. Some households kept water hour glasses. No, really. Glass tubes filled with water instead of sand. They weren't perfectly accurate, but they gave you a general sense of time. 1 jar's worth of water for 1 person's washing. Too fast, you're wasting. Too slow, you're probably shivering. You head toward the central market and pass a public notice board. On it, a new posting. Last night's collection. 7.3 m. That number will ripple out into dozens of tiny decisions. How much tea to brew, how many plants to water, whether to reopen the hammam. The mosque clerk you met earlier is here too, posting a smaller note beside it. Something about rotation schedules.
Ah, yes.
The communal cistern behind the mosque is low, and now families must take turns drawing water. 1 hour per household. No exceptions. It's an honor system, but in a city built on shared rain, dishonor gets noticed, and if someone breaks the rules, well, there were consequences. Not always dramatic. Sometimes just a stern word from the faqih, the religious scholar. Other times, a public shaming via poetry. Yes, poetry. A favorite format was a sarcastic couplet read aloud at the Friday market. Something like, "Oh, noble neighbor, with your leaky pot, next time ask before you take the lot." Harsh, maybe. Effective. Absolutely. You turn down a quieter lane and find an elderly woman pouring water from a covered jug into a ceramic basin. She does it slowly, measuring not by eye but by instinct. The basin fills just to the rim. No more. She doesn't spill a drop. When she catches your gaze, she gives a little smile, then covers the jug again with a folded cloth to keep the dust out. It's muscle memory by now. There's a rhythm to all this. You don't fetch water. You tend to it. You plan days around it. You pass it to the next generation with a solemn, unspoken oath, never waste. Even children were taught early. Some families had counting rhymes, little verses to help kids measure how much water to use for each task. Splash for face, splash for toes, one more if the camel blows his nose. Okay, maybe not that exact rhyme, but close. And in times of severe drought, entire city quarters might implement what was known as nazm, the system. It was a structured water sharing agreement, sometimes written on parchment and sealed with neighborhood elders' stamps. Each family's allotment would be listed by time, vessel size, and source. Break it, and your access could be revoked, or worse, you'd be publicly labeled mubadir, a waster. Social death by slow drip. You pause in front of a small shop where the owner is washing his entry tiles with gray water. Already used rinse from yesterday's laundry. Not wasteful, just efficient. He nods at you, then gestures proudly at the small cistern below the shop floor. 7 barrels, he says. Still good? You nod back, like you totally know what that means. And maybe you do now. In this world, water isn't just a liquid. It's a currency, a calendar, a covenant. It's measured, remembered, and sometimes even mourned when it disappears too fast. So you keep walking, a little slower now, listening to the city breathe. Somewhere behind every wall, a jug is being tipped. Somewhere overhead, a gutter waits for the next cloud. Every drop accounted for. Always. Today is dry, so dry that the fig trees look offended. The dust sits smug on every surface, and even the cats have retreated into clay pots for shade. You wander through the Medina of Fez with your collar up, dodging slivers of sun like they're molten. Not a cloud in sight. And that's when you feel it. That collective tightness in the city's breath. No one says it aloud, but everyone knows. It's a drought year. In 19th century Morocco, drought wasn't a surprise. It was a recurring guest, unwanted, uncomfortable, but entirely expected. The kind of visitor that didn't just knock, but camped out for months, sometimes years, rearranging your routines, your diet, your prayers. You pause at a bakery where the ovens are cold, not for lack of bread, but for lack of water. The baker steps outside, fans himself with a paddle, and mutters about dry wells. Behind him, the dough waits in silence, unbaked. These dry spells brought the city to a spiritual simmer, and when cisterns dipped below hope, the people turned upward, not just in mood, but in full ritual. Enter the Salat al-Istisqa, the rain prayer. You make your way to a public square, where the city's faithful once gathered for this solemn ritual. The ground beneath your sandals is worn smooth from centuries of barefoot worship. Imagine it now rows upon rows of residents, arms raised, voices lifted. The imam leads the prayer, asking for mercy, for forgiveness, and, please, for rain. Historians still argue whether these rituals had a meteorological effect or if they simply soothed frayed nerves. But either way, the city moved in unison. Shops closed, gossip hushed, people repented. Just in case the drought was divine judgment, you find a mosaic on a wall nearby, chipped but still vivid: a cloud, a stream, a tree. A simple plea carved in tile. It wasn't just poetic, it was functional art. If the rains didn't come, harvests failed, and markets shrank to shadows of themselves. And not just crops. Water meant trade. No rain meant no wool dyeing, no leather curing, no steam baths. The city slowed, like a heartbeat conserving energy. Bathhouses closed one by one. Laundresses rationed rinse water between customers. Even the birds bathed in dust. A quirky tidbit: some families kept a rain jar, a sealed clay vessel filled with rain from a particularly blessed year. They believed its presence in the house encouraged future storms. Think of it as a weather-themed lucky charm stored next to Grandma's wedding spoon. But when jars and prayers failed, things got creative. In rural villages, you'd find cloud summoners. Yes, actual people, tasked with performing traditional rituals to coax rain from a reluctant sky. One famous rain caller allegedly sang in a voice so mournful, the clouds would weep out of pity. Historians are skeptical. In urban fests, rituals were more coordinated. The rain prayer wasn't just religious, it was a social spectacle. Participants wore plain white, walked barefoot to the mosque, and often included livestock. Yes, goats and donkeys were part of the procession. Symbolism mattered. You brought along your everyday struggles, all bleeding and dusty, and laid them before the heavens. You wander into a madrasa, its central fountain dry. The usual splash of cool water replaced by the crackle of wind through palm fronds. A student passes, muttering a supplication under his breath, barely audible. Drought lives not just in the streets, but in the cadence of speech. People talk less, laugh less. Even whispers feel rationed. Inside the madrasa, the scholar's room is piled with scrolls, rain records, weather patterns, old prayers. Some of them contain equations you don't understand. Others have diagrams of wind currents and lunar cycles. These aren't just religious figures. They're meteorologists, scribes, and sometimes desperate optimists. Still, nothing changes. The sky remains a pale sheet, so the people wait. At the city's edge, beyond the walls, you find a flat expanse once used for emergency grazing. Today, it's the site of another gathering, a smaller one. Less formal, just a few elders, heads bowed, murmuring to the horizon. Historians debate whether these informal rituals had more power than the large public prayers. Was it the crowd that moved the heavens, or the quiet desperation of a few? No one knows. You sit among them quietly. The sun dips. A breeze lifts the hem of your cloak. A few gnats buzz with optimism, but the air stays bone. Then, a sound, so faint you almost miss it. A low drum roll on the wind. Thunder. No, just a cart rattling on stones. Still, everyone turns. Because in a place like this, even hope sounds like water. You wake to a sound that doesn't quite belong. Metal clanking. Voices not speaking Arabic. And the low groan of a water wheel turning with new creaks. You step outside, rubbing sleep from your eyes. And the skyline feels unfamiliar. The French have arrived. It's the late 1800s now, and Morocco is changing fast. In Fez and Rabat, in Casablanca, European boots scuff ancient alley stones, and new ideas about modern infrastructure drift into a landscape shaped for centuries by rain. You follow a team of engineers, some in pressed uniforms, others in shirt sleeves rolled high, as they inspect a freshly laid pipe. Iron, imported, glossy black, and stretching through the Medina like a metal serpent. The goal: deliver clean water to homes faster, more reliably, and without depending on the whims of the sky. Sounds good, right? Well, yes and no. You trail the pipe until it vanishes beneath a plaza, its entrance sealed with a bolted plate labeled Société Hydraulique du Maroc. French, of course. And just like that, water, once a sacred, shared, and sacredly slow process, is being mechanized. Historians still argue whether these colonial projects were helpful interventions or clumsy invasions of delicate systems. Certainly, French engineers built reservoirs and pumping stations that could outpace rain cisterns. But they also paved over old gutters, tore out local canals, and dismissed centuries of water wisdom as quaint superstition. You turn a corner and find a broken gutter pipe, terracotta, cracked and dry. Nearby, a shopkeeper mutters that ever since the city started getting its water from a machine, his family cistern has turned stagnant. Too much reliance on the pipe, not enough use. Rainwater no longer flows through the system. The old paths forget their jobs. Some neighborhoods resist the change. You pass a courtyard where the women still gather at the fountain, filling copper jugs and sharing complaints about the pipe water. Too metallic, too cold, not trustworthy. It doesn't remember the sky, one says, and you pause, because that sounds ridiculous. But also true. You visit a hammam where the water now comes from a boiler heated by coal, pumped in from underground tanks. Efficient, yes, but the steam smells different, less earthy, and the old tadlocked walls have started to flake, chemicals from the treated water seeping into the plaster. Quirky side effect. In one riad, a family has repurposed their cistern as a wine cellar. Might as well use it, the uncle shrugs, holding up a dusty bottle of dubious vintage. You sip, it tastes like rebellion. You stroll past the new administrative quarter. Tall windows, balconies, even a tiny cafe offering espresso. A plaque boasts about modern water service since 1897, but behind the building, the old drainage trench still whispers to itself after a rain. You crouch and peer in. It's half buried, forgotten, but still it works. A French officer once wrote, "The native population relies too much on rain. It is inefficient." What he didn't understand is that the inefficiency was the point. Rain took time. Storage took care. Distribution required trust. A whole society grew from those slow rhythms. Now everything is supposed to be fast. Pipes, pumps, pressure gauges. You visit a new water station outside town. Concrete, iron, and a loud diesel engine thumping like an impatient drum. The workers offer you a tour, proud of their machinery. This can fill 1,000 tanks in a day, one boasts, and it can. But what it can't do is explain the loss. Loss of the community checking water levels together. Loss of the rooftop dance of gutter cleaning. Loss of that moment when rain returned, and everyone, from child to elder, looked up and breathed as one. The pipe doesn't invite celebration, it invites payment. Metered, monthly. Disconnected from the sky. Still, not everything is bleak. Some engineers are respectful. One Moroccan apprentice you meet, Ali, shows you his notebook, where he's trying to design a hybrid system. Rain first, pipe second, he says. We catch it, and only use the pipe when the sky is silent. You smile. There's hope in that sketch. Historians say Morocco's rainwater traditions began to fade during this time. But fade isn't the same as vanish. In the cracks, in the courtyards, in the stubborn houses where the cisterns were never quite sealed, the old ways whisper. You end your walk beneath a small dome where a pipe meets a gutter. Someone's fitted the junction with a ceramic bowl. It looks clumsy. Temporary. But it works. Rain runs through the gutter, down the pipe, and collects in the bowl. A child sits nearby, dipping her fingers in and giggling. She doesn't care if it's old or new. She only knows it's water. The heat presses down like a heavy blanket, and the city breathes in slow, shallow rhythms. You step into the courtyard of a family riad, and at first glance, it looks like nothing much is happening. A dog naps in the corner. A fig tree throws lazy shade. But listen closer, and you hear it. The soft clink of metal on clay, the careful splash of water into a basin, the low hum of a woman's voice counting. This is where the real work of water happens. Not in pipes or cisterns or colonial blueprints, but in courtyards like this, in the quiet, endless choreography of women, water, and waiting. In 19th century Morocco, managing water wasn't just a household task. It was an art form passed down through generations, honed by necessity, whispered from mother to daughter with the kind of gravity usually reserved for secrets. Who fetches it? Who stores it? Who decides when it's used? And how much? You step into the shade and watch a teenage girl rinse lentils with astonishing precision. She pours a ladle of water from a jug, swirls it, drains it off, repeats. The jug is capped with folded cloth, embroidered at the corners. Not just for show, it keeps flies and dust out, yes, but also tells you which jug holds what. One for cooking, one for drinking, one for plants. Historians still argue whether this domestic division of water labor empowered women or burdened them. On one hand, control over water was control over life. On the other, it was constant, nonstop vigilance over every pot and drop. You wander into the kitchen where the morning's supply is lined up. 3 ceramic jars, collis, stand under a shelf, each slightly sweating in the heat. Clay keeps the water cool, naturally, but it's also fragile. A chipped rim could ruin a week's supply. So the women check them daily, hands running gently over their rounded bellies like midwives feeling for movement. And yes, fetching water was often a woman's task. You step out into the alley and follow a pair of sisters as they walk to a shared tap a few streets away. One of the few modern additions the neighborhood's accepted. Each carries a copper jug, perfectly balanced on a hip or head, chatting softly, steps in sync. It's a commute, a social moment, and a quiet assertion of care. Quirky detail. Some girls could tell the temperature by the weight of a full jug. Warmer water was just a little more buoyant in its slosh. You test this theory later with 2 identical pots, and honestly, you're not sure. But she swears by it, so you believe her. You pass another house where the matriarch is brushing the courtyard floor with a palm frond broom dipped in gray water. She hums as she works. The sweep pattern is deliberate. Circles, then lines, then circles again. It's not random. Each movement stretches that water further, cools the space, settles dust, and, more importantly, teaches the watching children how it's done. Inside, a toddler helps her grandmother strain drinking water through a cloth. Not because it needs straining, but because the act itself is tradition. 1 layer for dust, 1 for sediment, 1 for time. You sit with them for a while, sipping mint tea made from water that's been boiled, cooled, and whispered over. That's not superstition, it's habit. Water gets treated with reverence not because it's rare, but because it carries everything. The garden, the meal, the mood. A small fountain burbles in the corner of the courtyard. It's modest, no more than a trickle over painted tile. The rainwater flows into it from a hidden cistern underfoot, and the sound is more important than the volume. It cools the mind. It signals calm. One of the children places her toy boat in the shallow pool, letting it bob gently like a leaf on memory. You ask the mother how she knows when to refill the household jars. She smiles and taps her ear. You hear when they're light. She lifts one and shakes it gently, producing a sound somewhere between a slosh and a sigh. Another woman chimes in. It's not about how full. It's about how long it will last. She gestures toward the sky. Clouds coming. Maybe wait, no clouds. Use less today. Drought coming. Use even less. Historians love charts and ledgers, but they often miss this. Water planning wasn't just recorded in notebooks. It was in hands, voices, muscle memory. Domestic hydrology, you might call it. And when disputes arose, who used too much, who didn't fill the pot, those were resolved not by courts, but by quiet stares across courtyard walls, or by pointed refills done with a bit too much clanging. Subtle justice. You visit a widow's home where she still uses the same cistern her grandmother used. It's not large. She tends it herself, pulls water with a rope and bucket, filters it through charcoal wrapped in linen. She doesn't trust the tap. It tastes like nothing, she says. This tastes like when I was a child. She hands you a cup. It does. Or maybe it's just the story layered into the minerals. The afternoon sun shifts, throwing lattice shadows across the courtyard. The family begins to prepare for evening. Bowls are rinsed, floors splashed lightly, hands scrubbed in a trickle of water measured out in palmfuls. You realize then that water isn't passive here. It's not just fetched. It's invited, greeted, thanked. And always, shared. You're back in the narrow alleys of Fez, and something's off. Not the weather. It's the same dry breeze, the same faint smell of cumin from someone's lunch drifting lazily through the air. Not the people. They're going about their routines, drawing water, sweeping courtyards, sharing quiet news over shutters. No, it's the water itself. A low murmur passes from doorway to doorway. The cistern's lower than it should be. It didn't rain last night, did it? I checked the Mekius twice. Water doesn't just vanish. Not in a place like this. Not when every drop is tracked, measured, and practically worshipped. So where's it gone? You find yourself standing by a stone shaft at the center of a communal courtyard. The cover has been slid slightly askew. Someone's been accessing it in the night. You lean closer. The air smells wrong. Not spoiled exactly, but off. Like someone's been meddling. In 19th century Morocco, water theft wasn't just inconvenient, it was borderline treason. It meant someone had disrupted the quiet trust that held entire neighborhoods together. Water wasn't private property so much as a communal inheritance. Everyone got their turn. Everyone shared. Historians still argue how frequent water theft really was. Some say it's exaggerated in tales and cautionary poems. Others point to dusty court ledgers with accusations like diverting gutter flow or tampering with cistern stone. You flip through one such record, a detailed account of a man fined 3 goats for drilling a tiny channel to siphon rainwater from his neighbor's terrace. But not all thefts were subtle. You walk through a tannery quarter and hear the clatter of hooves. A donkey trots by, its saddlebags suspiciously wet. The owner hurries behind, too fast for comfort. That's not laundry water, you think. That's cistern water, and the donkey knows it. In fact, that donkey might be the most overworked thief's accomplice in the city. Locals whisper about the wet justice. Nicknamed punishments dealt for water theft. Some were creative, public apologies, written in chalk on alley walls. Others more physical required repairs to the stolen, from cistern, supervised by the neighborhood elder, who had a gift for saying, faster, without raising his voice. You pass a home where a gutter pipe is now padlocked. That's how serious things got. A child nearby tells you that the last person who tried to siphon from it ended up rinsing fish guts for a week. She says it with a grin, but you can't tell if she's joking. A quirky tale floats around this neighborhood. A parrot trained to scream, THIF, anytime someone opened the courtyard cistern without permission. It once squawked at the actual water measurer, causing a minor panic and a poetic scandal that made its way into a madrasa's drama performance. In places with shared cisterns, especially among families living in vertical clusters, disputes got even messier. A night of loud splashing could mean someone was taking more than their share. Retaliations might include dyeing the cistern pink with beet juice, dramatic, or replacing the rope bucket with one full of holes. Passive, aggressive brilliance. Still, not all stories end with punishment. You meet a man who confesses, quietly, that as a boy, he once stole 2 jugs of water during a summer drought. He needed it for his mother's garden. Instead of turning him in, the neighbor refilled the jugs and left him a note. Come next time. No shame in asking. That's the thing. These systems weren't built just on enforcement. They were built on community memory. Trust didn't just prevent theft, it forgave it. Sometimes. But the risk was always there. You duck into a public fountain, still active, still dribbling sweet rain, caught water through a carved lion's mouth. An inscription warns, in old script, "He who misguides the flow shall guide regret." It's more poetic than threatening, but still, message received. Historians highlight this tension between shared access and individual need. It's a dance of restraint. You don't take what isn't yours. You don't hoard. And you absolutely don't reroute a neighbor's spout with a cleverly placed rock and a bit of wax, even if your cousin insists. Everyone does it. You watch a boy fill a jug, glance around, and pour a little extra into a neighbor's plant pot. A peace offering, or a clever deflection. Hard to say. You follow him back to a home where the cistern's edge is marked with tiny scratches. Tallies, perhaps, or reminders. The kind only a family would recognize. A private language of water. At the door, his grandmother sits polishing a copper spout. She looks up, eyes sharp, and says, "No one steals when they remember who taught them to pour." Then she smiles. Theft happens. But memory holds longer than rope. You leave the city behind. The dust of Fez fades into open space, the tight stone alleys giving way to low hills and open sky. The rhythm changes too. No longer the constant footfall of 100 neighbors, no hum of overlapping voices. Just wind, a few clinking goat bells, and the crunch of dry earth beneath your sandals. You're heading into the fringes now. Toward the desert, edge villages where rain is not just rare, it's mythical. These are places built not in defiance of drought, but in graceful surrender to it. They don't fight the sky. They woo it. Your guide, a wary man with a straw hat that's seen better centuries, leads you to a hamlet perched on a low ridge. Clay homes the color of baked bread, date palms, a sense of time so slow it might be moving backwards, and above it all, sloped rooftops that look like they're praying. Here, every house is a rain-catching machine. Roofs aren't flat, they're tilted, ever so slightly inward. Each one funnels water into central catchments, like cupped hands. From above, it's like a constellation of little thirsts waiting to be quenched. You climb a stone staircase to the top of a home and stand beside a broad, sloping roof, its surface surprisingly smooth. It's covered in glowy, a kind of packed earth layered with small pebbles and a final polish of lime. Not fancy, not fragile, but functional. Rain, when it comes, slides right down into a carved trough, which guides it toward the central tank below. Your guide points to a ceramic jar buried at the edge. "Overflow," he says. "In this village, they plan for just in case, because sometimes the sky gives all at once, and sometimes not for years." Historians still argue whether these rural techniques were borrowed from Berber mountain settlements or developed independently in arid plains. The truth, as usual, is probably a bit of both. Ideas passed like seeds, taking root wherever the rain was shy. You kneel beside a cistern cap, thick clay, sealed with a stone weight. Your guide lifts it gently. The smell is earthy cool. Not unlike a wine cellar. You peer inside. The water glimmers faintly in the dark, and even the air seems to hold its breath around it. Each household has one of these, and each household guards it with a kind of quiet awe. They don't measure in liters here. They measure in weeks, in teapots, in goats watered, in baths skipped. Quirky touch. Some families in this region kept a dried fig branch by the cistern. If it curled, it meant the tank was drying too fast. A homegrown humidity gauge with a poetic flair. You walk through the village and notice how every surface gently leans. Courtyard floors tilt ever so slightly toward planters. Even windowsills have grooves to catch early morning condensation. Nothing goes unused. You're shown a community well, stone, lined, hand-dug, and covered with a woven mat. It's used only in dire times. Rainwater is always preferred. Fresher. Holier, some say. Tastes like the sky remembered you. You ask about sharing, and your guide nods slowly. We trade water with dates, with cheese, sometimes with a song. In lean years, families sign oral agreements, known only to those involved, passed down with eye contact and a handshake. No ledgers, just memory. You pass a goat pen with slanted thatch roofing. A bowl beneath catches roof runoff. Barely a cup per day, but enough for the animals. Even the goats are on ration logic. Children run by with tiny buckets, chasing an imaginary flood. One of them shouts, "Rain in my bucket," and the others cheer. It's a game, but it's also a wish. A woman invites you into her home. It's one large room, thick walls, soft light. In the corner, a clay urn rests in a cool trench. "This is the guest water," she says. "Reserved. Sacred." You sip. It's faintly sweet, sun-warmed, with a mineral kiss. She smiles. Stored rain tastes better. Like it tried. Historians tend to skip places like this. No documents. No famous architecture. But here, every stone is a thesis. Every roof a hypothesis. Every drop of rain a miracle measured in cupped hands. You step out as the light begins to dim. The wind picks up a little, tossing fine sand in soft whispers. Your guide taps a stone with his foot. "If it rains tonight," he says, "you'll hear the roof sing." You laugh until it happens, the first drop, then another. And then the roof really does sing. A high, hollow tapping as rain dances down the slope and into the catchment jar with a sound like applause. Not thunder. Not flood. Just gratitude. Morning light breaks with a softness that belongs only to places far from clocks. You wake to the distant sound of roosters, the slow creak of wooden doors, and the low, steady plunk of water dripping into a clay basin. It's not a leak. It's intentional. Someone left a date, palm branch angled just right to guide the last of last night's rainfall into a planter. You're in the farming belt now, where the desert begins to flirt with green, and every crop is a conversation with water. In 19th century Morocco, rainwater harvesting wasn't just about drinking or washing. It was agricultural. It was economic. It was a way of feeding people, animals, and sometimes entire trade caravans. Your host, a farmer with a smile as wide as the plain, waves you over to his orchard. It doesn't look like much. Low stone terraces, cracked earth, a few scrubby trees, but everything here is deliberate. The land has been coaxed, not conquered. And the secret is buried in plain sight. Beneath your feet lie narrow ditches, seguous, lined with stone or compacted earth. They crisscross like veins through the fields, guiding water from rooftop cisterns, sloped catchment roofs, or even hillside channels. These aren't flood irrigation systems. They're whisper systems. Gentle, measured. Your host kneels beside a junction, lifts a smooth flat rock, and reveals a tiny wooden gate beneath. He lifts it, and a trickle of water begins to flow, just enough to reach a patch of herbs. "We don't pour," he says. "We whisper." You chuckle, but he's right. Every drop is guided. No sprays, no flooding, just slow delivery, fed by harvests that begin in the clouds. Historians still argue whether these micro-irrigation systems were born in ancient Berber settlements or imported from Andalusia via Islamic scholars. Most agree the ideas merged, adapted to Morocco's unique geography, and, frankly, its stubborn skies. The date palms sway gently in the breeze. Beneath each one lies a shallow basin, ringed with stones. These are more than pretty patterns. They're mini retention craters, designed to slow down runoff and allow it to seep deep into the root zone. Without them, the palm would parch. With them, it thrives, even when the rains are stingy. A quirky habit. Some farmers kept hand-drawn rain maps, not geographic maps, but records of where water pooled best during storms. One old man shows you a goatskin scroll with tiny dots and arrows. Parrot puddles. Here it seeps. He adds a fresh arrow while you watch. The paper smells like cedar and mud. You move on to the village edge, where a cluster of earthen buildings rises. Inside one, a storeroom for dried goods. You spot a carved wooden tablet hung near the doorway. It's not decorative. It's a record of rain days, planting days, and yield. Rain isn't just a necessity here, it's an employee, a sometimes absent, always critical one. And yes, there were laws. Even out here, miles from the city, early environmental codes existed. If you blocked a neighbor's rain channel, you were fined, not in cash, but in labor or crops. One such rule stated that no rooftop may grow trees unless water runoff is shared. Another outlawed tilting your catchment gutter toward private storage during declared droughts. Water equity, long before hashtags. You pass a melon patch that looks improbably healthy. Turns out, the farmer has rigged a series of small clay pipes, connats, buried just below the surface. They leak slowly from a hillside tank, itself filled during the last storm. It's a gravity-fed miracle, and one that requires exactly zero electricity. And it's not just about food. You visit a pottery studio, where the clay is mixed using rainwater, filtered 3 times. The potter swears it binds better, holds its shape longer. City water makes lazy clay, she says, poking a lump with a smirk. You find leatherworkers using rain, softened hides, dyers soaking fabric in rooftop, collected water to prevent mineral staining. Every trade here bends to the will of water. When it's good, life hums. When it's gone, life pauses. You're led to a shared field, used by multiple families. A tall post stands in the center, marked with carved lines. It's a water totem, the elder explains. Each line represents a flood year, a drought year, a windfall. The bottom, most notches barely visible. That was the dry year. You drank cactus water then. The day grows hot. You rest under a fig tree, cooled by a breeze that seems to smell of wet stone and mint. The fig tree's roots are cradled in a bed of stones. Gesser style, an ancient technique that traps runoff and reduces evaporation. It's the kind of wisdom that doesn't shout, it just works. And the people here, they listen. To the wind, to the sky, to the way a jug sounds when it's less than half full. Rain isn't just weather out here, it's a calendar. A teacher, a gossip, a guest who always arrives late but never uninvited. You close your eyes as your host's voice floats in from somewhere near the field. We don't wait for rain. We prepare like it's coming tomorrow. And somehow, that makes it feel closer. You've returned to the edge of the Medina. Not the bustling heart, not the sleepy fringe, but that strange middle ground where ancient systems bump elbows with satellite dishes. It's here, tucked between forgotten courtyards and satellite domes, that you find the half-remembered relics of Morocco's rain, harvesting golden age. The houses look ordinary. Cracked plaster, satellite dishes, faded laundry flags flapping in the breeze. But beneath these humble facades lie clay cisterns, stone gutters, and Tadillac-covered basins, still intact, still functional, though their caretakers no longer remember every detail of how they work. You're led to one such house by a boy with dusty feet and the world's most serious eyebrows. It still fills when it rains, he says, pointing to a round clay lid in his grandmother's courtyard. You lift it. Cool air rushes up, and beneath it, the cistern yawns open. Shallow, but usable. No one drinks it. He adds, "My aunt says it's ancestor water." You're not sure if that's reverent or a polite excuse to stick with bottled stuff. Inside, his grandmother polishes a metal tray, and when asked about the cistern, she shrugs. It was always there. She doesn't remember the last time someone cleaned it properly. But she knows the gutter that feeds it still works. Sort of. As long as birds don't nest in it, it's a common story now. Systems that were once meticulously maintained are now background features, like a fireplace in a house with central heating. They exist. They function. But only just. Historians have mixed feelings about this. Some call it decay, others call it quiet continuity. The truth is probably a third thing, legacy by habit. People don't remember how or why the system works. They just know it's there, and it would be foolish to break it. You walk through another alley and find a riot-turned guest house. The manager proudly shows you the authentic 19th century fountain. It's fed by a rain cistern. It's Still working, he says. We use it to water the courtyard plants. You ask if they ever drink the water. He chuckles. Tourists prefer bottled. The fountain gurgles quietly. Water flows down a spout worn smooth. You run your fingers along its curve and feel the faint ridge of handwork. This wasn't mass-produced. It was carved by someone who knew exactly how water bends. A quirky scene in a nearby neighborhood. A homeowner has converted their rooftop cistern into a tiny fish pond. Goldfish. Plastic lily pads. It's absurdly charming, but the slope and spout remain. If it rained, they'd still catch every drop. Function hiding in whimsy. You visit a tiled bathhouse, closed now, but preserved like a stage set. The roof gutters still channel water into the central dome, though the pipes are mostly dry. A caretaker brushes cobwebs from the corner. Used to be the only clean bath in this part of town, he says. People would line up when the rain came. Another house nearby has its Tadillac cistern, converted into a pantry. Olive jars rest where once there was water. You run your hand along the inside, smooth as waxed stone, still watertight, just unremembered. But not all is lost. You're shown a small rooftop garden tended by a woman in her 60s. She waters it from a clay pot filled with rooftop runoff. It's not about saving water, she says. It's about using what already arrived. She taps her forehead. The sky gives, so you keep. And in this slow way, these old systems survive. Not through manuals or museums, but through use. Quiet, irregular use. Not efficient, not optimized, but faithful. Historians debate whether these rain harvesting features should be restored or left as romantic curiosities. Some cities try hybrid models, rain-fed fountains with municipal overflow, or educational sites where school children watch rain swirl down ancient gutters. You visit one of those schools. A teacher lifts a tile flap and shows a class the underground cistern. The kids gasp. It goes down that far. They press their noses to the edge, and for a second, they see rain not just as weather, but as a thing to keep. A girl raises her hand. What if we made new ones? And the teacher smiles. That's the dream. You finish the day back on a rooftop, the city stretching in soft dusk around you. Satellite dishes spin slowly in the breeze. Somewhere nearby, a gutter coughs, then clears. A slow trickle begins its descent into a cistern that hasn't been officially inspected in years. You smile. The rain still comes. The system still holds. And though the knowledge fades, the shape remains, like the outline of a forgotten song that you still know how to hum. You walk slowly now. Not from fatigue, though you've covered miles, from roof to gutter to cistern and beyond, but because you feel the gravity of it all. Beneath your feet, beneath the tiled streets and concrete patches, lie veins of history. Not golden, not grand, just damp. The final piece of your journey takes you into the newly paved quarter of the city. Modern buildings, buzzing mopeds, gleaming glass doors that reflect more sunlight than sense. Here at first glance, rainwater harvesting is over, replaced by pipes, drains, grids, and concrete. But dig a little. Quite literally. You meet a municipal worker repairing a section of sidewalk. Beneath the fresh cement, he uncovers a hollow stone tunnel. Another old canat, he grunts, brushing off decades of dust. Still dry, but not forgotten. He lifts a panel, and there it is, a long, forgotten cistern. Brick, lined and surprisingly intact. No one knew it was here. Or if they did, they stopped saying so a long time ago. It's probably 150 years old, he says, almost reverently. Still smells like rain. Historians call these ghost cisterns. Buried beneath city growth, silent and sealed but waiting, still holding the shape of a world that moved with the sky. There are hundreds, maybe thousands, lying dormant beneath neighborhoods, plazas, even traffic circles, each one a sleeping witness. You take a walking tour of these invisible relics, guided not by markers, but by murmurs. In one cafe, a floor hatch leads to what was once a communal well. In another, a boutique built its display around an old catchment tunnel, now lit with soft LEDs and a discreet plaque Rain path, 1844. Even in brand new buildings, you find nods. One apartment complex has rainwater, tanks fitted beneath its parking garage. They say it's eco-conscious, but when you trace the blueprints, the design mirrors those ancient rooftop to courtyard systems. Coincidence? Hardly. The past doesn't vanish. It echoes. You enter a mosque built just 5 years ago. Sleek, clean lines, solar panels. But in the courtyard, a fountain catches rainwater through a sloped tile roof. The cleric smiles as he explains, it's new, but not new. Modern Morocco doesn't reject its rain harvesting roots. It just forgets them for a while, then rediscovers them under fresh coats of paint and policy. Sustainability is suddenly trendy again, but here, it's always been necessary. A quirky twist. One art collective in Rabat built a sound installation using hidden rainwater gutters. When it rains, the whole building sings. Not a metaphor, actual music. Pitched pipes, tuned catchments, and old clay echo chambers brought back to life. You return to Fez and walk through the Medina one final time. Now that you know what to look for, you see it everywhere. A cracked wall that once held a spout. A dome too steep to be decorative. A courtyard that whispers of deeper purposes. And then the sky darkens. It's not a heavy rain, just a whisper. A patter on canvas awnings and plastic chairs, mixing with the scent of mint and cumin. People move, but slowly. No panic. A few turn their faces upward. One old man lifts his hands, murmurs a quiet prayer, then disappears into a doorway. You follow a rivulet as it snakes down the street, past potted basil, over stone thresholds, and into a gap beneath a wall. Somewhere in the dark, it joins water from other corners, other roofs. Maybe even a cistern still waiting for the season to turn. And just like that, the system breathes again. The city drinks. And you, silent, still, surrounded by wet stone and soft voices, understand something very old and very quiet. Rain doesn't just fall, it arrives. And when it does, Morocco remembers. Our word count 1:75 wind, down 300 words, so now. As the last droplets slip into shadowed catchments, and the rooftops glisten in quiet satisfaction, let yourself slow down. There's no rush. You've walked far, through dust and drizzle, through quiet courtyards and echoing cisterns. You've listened to the city's old ways, the ones that aren't loud, but long. Imagine yourself lying back now, on a gently sloped roof, still warm from the day, the faint scent of olive soap and rain, damp plaster in the air. Somewhere below, someone pours tea with water pulled from a jar that once caught the sky. The wind is soft. No more footsteps. Just the hush of a city winding down, one stone gutter at a time. Even the ghosts of water, those dry cisterns and buried tunnels, rest now. They've waited centuries, and they'll wait more, because they're patient. They remember every storm, every dry season, every rooftop prayer. You don't have to understand it all. You just have to feel the rhythm, the way rain falls and fades, the way hands still carry jugs with care, the way a city holds memory in tile and lime and silence. Take a breath, let it be slow. Let your thoughts drift like drops down a terracotta spout. No rush. You're exactly where you need to be.